Large cappuccino. Orders up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Athlete Cafe. I'm Kylene, and we have a fun episode for you guys today. We have another special guest here, Alexis. And I'm really excited for the conversations we're going to have today. Our goal is to kind of start bridging the gap between mental performance and physical performance. Alexis has a really cool background. She has a pretty big role at our company. She is a general manager here at Sharpen Skills, but she also does a lot of our coaching. She helps run our physical training facility. She does strength and conditioning, sport coaching, and just a lot of really cool stuff. So before we kind of get into some of the fun mental performance topics, I will give her the floor and let her introduce herself.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for inviting me to come and talk to you. Like you were saying, my name's Alexis. I'm the general manager at Sharpen Skills Training, and I can't really tell you what that role all entails.
Everything.
But
she helps with everything.
It's a lot. So part of my role is just the overall background and operations of the facility that we have in Brunswick. I help manage all the operations behind the scenes of the mental performance. So when athletes are trying to schedule their payments and all the other fun nitty-gritty things, I help with our trainers, making sure that they're covering the right classes, any athletes that come in to do workouts. I coach some of the volleyball classes that we offer, whether it's a camp, private lessons, skills, the little volley tots. I kind of do a bunch of different things at the company, which keeps me on my toes, which is a lot of fun. Can be hectic at sometimes, but I'm really excited to be here and kind of talk through some of my experiences as an athlete, as a coach, and just what I see kind of day to day in the physical training world.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. It's a whole new perspective that we're bringing in, so it's super cool.
For sure. Well, I can talk a little bit about my athletic background, where I come from. Yeah. So growing up, I played a bunch of different sports. I was lucky enough to have a good neighborhood that had a lot of kids around my age. We would play all sorts of sports, between basketball, foursquare, soccer, baseball. We would ride our scooters and bicycles up and down the road. So I was very active, and so I got to play a lot of sports. Not to say I was good at all of them, but I got a lot of experience playing a lot of different sports. But my main sports growing up were softball, similar to you. And then I played volleyball from third grade all the way up through my sophomore year of college. So I have a lot of knowledge in volleyball world, softball world, but that's kind of my athletic background. And I got to coaching right around my sophomore year of college. I started coaching 12-year-olds in volleyball, and I've coached all different levels, between 12s all the way through varsity level at the high school. So a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different mentalities as you visit
Lots of changes.
Kids. Yes. As you visit all those ages. So my athletic background comes in those sports, but it's been cool to learn and see at the gym. You know, I've learned a lot of lacrosse, learned some pickleball now. So it's been interesting to just pick up on all the different sports that the athletes that we work with.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the really cool thing about our company and working in a job like we're in. It's we are not limited to just one sport. It's maybe I've never really heard or thought about one of these sports and working with it, but we get to try it, we get to talk about it and learn, and it's really fun. So
right, yeah. I mean, I've just picked up lacrosse in the last 2 years, and I start with the little kindergartners, learning how to cradle, learning how to shoot, and once in a while I'll catch myself in the gym trying to actually put a good shot on goal, and I'm maybe I should have been a lacrosse player.
You gotta test it every once in a while. You never know.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. A lot of different athletes that you get to work with at the gym, all different ages, all different backgrounds. So that's a good and a fun part of the job.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's more the sport coaching side of things, and
right.
then you do strength and conditioning as well, right?
Yeah. So part of my background came in college. I was, trying to find a job on campus, like what can I do? And I found group fitness classes. I had been going to the gym like on my own, and my roommates and I were like, well, let's try some of these like free group exercise classes. And I'm like, all right, I guess so. And we took a cardio kickboxing class.
Ooh, fun.
It was a fun class, never had done anything like it before, and I was like, oh, this is really fun. We kept going, and as I got more comfortable, I'm like, well, let me try some of their cycling classes, let me try some of their other group strength classes, and it like really brought out some of the different like aspects of training. So I ended up applying, and I went through the application audition process of becoming a group fitness instructor, and really enjoyed coaching other individuals. So I started teaching strength classes, I started teaching cycling classes, and that's kind of where my like love and passion for strength and conditioning kind of started. As I went through college, I got my degree in exercise science from Ohio State, and said, you know what, I want to continue to pursue this. I want to go deeper into strength and conditioning. So I graduated in the midst of COVID, said, okay, well, what can I do next? And I ended up going to the University of Ashland, or Ashland University, to get my master's degree. And same field, exercise science, with that focus in strength and conditioning. So I got some certifications. I got my personal training certification, my group fitness certification, and just really fell in love with training individuals. And because I was an athlete myself, I really wanted to focus on training athletics and helping athletes get better in their sport, whatever sport that might be. My love just fell in volleyball, so I was like, I want to help volleyball players get better, but I would love to help anyone that said, I want to get faster, I want to get stronger, I want to jump higher. I'm like, great, like, let's do it. Yeah. So that's where a lot of like the strength and conditioning ended up coming into play, and using my knowledge, my background, my degree, and saying, okay, how can I create a program that's going to help athletes excel in their sport?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so fun. And that's, I think, like one of the coolest sides of sports is like all of that behind the scenes stuff that can make people better athletes, right? So I had like a similar kind of background where I got my undergrad in exercise science, and then like I've had strength and conditioning coaching experience too. And sure, the mental performance is fun because we get to talk to our athletes and see how they're doing mentally, and like of course we can notice some things in their play just by how they're performing, but there's so much more like measurable stuff from the strength and conditioning side that is so fun to see and watch athletes grow, right? Like you can get athletes, you get athletes that come into the gym and they have no idea how to do a squat, right? It's like, okay, so we start with the basics, start teaching them the form, teaching them how to do it properly and safely, and then we're hitting PRs and they're adding to their weights and they're wanting to push themselves. And I think especially with those younger athletes, like learning how to push themselves and like try something that you might fail at or you might get, and just like the reward that comes with it and like being there with them is just so fun.
For sure. And probably like jumping a little bit ahead, but like the main difference that I feel like between the physical and the mental performance is that I'm a visual person, so I love being able to see the numbers increase. So I like love helping athletes. Oh, you started at benching the bar. Well, it's like now let's see, and our number is now 95 pounds. So then we're seeing that increase like visually versus something that you can't always necessarily see. So that's a fun part of why I like the strength and conditioning aspect. You're seeing athletes progress, you're helping them get better, and might just be in the weight room, but that all is going to translate into their sport as they start to compete.
Yeah, it all comes together.
It does. It really does.
Awesome. Okay, so that's your strength and conditioning, how you got into that. I know we touched on coaching a little bit, but what made you want to go into like sport coaching, like that side of things?
So I mentioned that I was playing volleyball. I played up until my senior year of high school, and at that point I was like, I'm not going to go play in college. Like I had made peace with leaving volleyball in the past, and I said, I just want to go. I want to focus on my academics. I want to go have fun and just focus on my degree and what my future could hold. And as I got closer to moving into school, I like felt this itch. I'm like, all right, I really miss playing, but I want to go to Ohio State. Like that was my dream school. I wanted to go there. I'm like, I'm not going to go play Division I there, and I had no intention of doing that anyway. But I started to miss playing, miss that competitive aspect to it. And I had some friends that were playing club, and they said, you should come try out for the club team. It's not as competitive as playing Division I or even at any collegiate level, but it is not intramurals.
Yeah, you're
I was
still
like,
playing.
You're still competitive. You're still, you still get to travel. So I said, okay, like, let me try out. I don't know. I mean, Ohio State's pretty big. You have 150 to 200 girls trying out for 30 spots. Oof. And I was fortunate enough to make one of the teams, and it was a lot of fun. I was playing, with a lot of my friends, and it was definitely way laid back. We practiced 2 to 3 times a week. We went to 2 to 3 tournaments a semester. We got to travel to other universities. So it was like the right balance of, having fun, but still get that like competitive aspect to it. And as we were going through, I was approached by a local club director, and they're like, we're looking for coaches. Would anyone be interested? And those that know me know that I don't like to not be busy. So I'm like, of course, I'll jump on anything that someone like asks me to do. So I said, sure, I'll make it work in my schedule. So I'm teaching group fitness classes. I'm going to school. I'm playing volleyball. I've got another job on campus, and I'm saying, all right, let me coach too.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? So I started coaching 12-year-olds at that point. Very, laid back kind of. I didn't have to do a ton of work to it. I was really learning, especially as a first year coach. And after that, so that was 2019. That next year was 2020. COVID started to hit, and I was in the middle of coaching, and we had to cut our season short. And I'm like, wow, I really enjoyed this part of my life, and now it's like we've stopped. And at that point, there was no volleyball tournaments or anything, so like part of the world just, like everyone else, it just stopped. So after I graduated, I continued to focus on how can I coach. So I went back to the club that I played for growing up, and I said, are you guys looking for coaches? And they're like, yeah, always. And I said, I have a couple years of coaching from college. I'd love to take on a team. And they said, okay, here's a group of 13-year-olds.
Oh, they threw you right in.
They said, okay, here you go. And at that point, I said, okay, I got to like pick and choose who I wanted on my team. And right around that same time, an old coach of mine reached out and said, hey, do you want to coach at the middle school level? I said, you know what? Okay, because I don't like to not be busy. I said, yeah, I'll coach middle school, and then I'll go right into a club season.
Why not?
Why not? And so I've started, and I've coached pretty much ever since then. Again, coaching between, I started at 12s. I moved from 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s. I've coached middle school, 7th and 8th grade. I've coached 9th graders, and I assist on the varsity teams. So I've seen a wide range of different levels, different athletic personalities, different athletic skill levels. So that's kind of where my coaching all came from, and I just love expressing my love for the sport, that I love coaching. I'm like, I'll do anything. I'll do group lessons, I'll do private lessons. I've started like the little Volley Top program of trying to do like kindergarten and just teaching kids, my love for the sport, and that's how I'm like giving back to the sport that I grew up playing and the sport that I love.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's like the best part about coaching, especially at those younger ages. So like this season, I'm helping coach a local hockey team as well. So we're a PB team, so it's like 10 to 12-year-olds. We have like girls and boys. And it's just so cool to be that person to, like you said, like share your love for the sport with them, right? Like this is when they're kind of deciding like, do I want to play this sport? They're just learning what they can do with it, kind of trying to figure things out. So if you can be the one to like make that impact on them and like help them love it and give them the tools to love it and succeed and learn, like it's just such a fun spot to be in.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I always tell, like at the beginning of every season, I never want to be the coach that makes you want to hate the sport, because like there was times like growing up, I had terrible coaches that like made me like think is this the sport that I want to play?
Yeah.
And, you know, I pushed through it. Like, my mom grew up playing volleyball. She coached me when I was like really young, and I like fell in love with it. And then as I got older, there was other coaches that had a very different like mentality, and how their coaching style was made me not love the sport anymore. And so I tell myself, and I tell the players, I'm like, I never want you to hate the sport.
Yeah.
So I want to just do everything I can to show you how much I love what we're doing and all the skills that you can learn, no matter at what level. That's what brings me like the most joy.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. I will say it can be hard as coaches to remind yourself of that sometimes when we're in the heat of the moment. I know there are quite a few situations during games when I just want to look at my little hockey players and be like, what are you doing?
Oh yeah.
But remembering that they're starting from the basics, right? And just also athletes remembering that your coaches are human too.
Right. Oh yeah.
And being able to have those conversations, and just, I think you learn a lot being a coach, and just how things work from that side of things. It's a whole new perspective, but it's a lot of fun.
It is. Yeah. It's definitely, you know, it fills my cup at the end of the day, like seeing kids get better. Like my whole goal, like deciding of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be when I grew up, was I want to help athletes. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know in what capacity, but whether it's through their strength and conditioning background or through the actual skills of a sport, like I just want to help them be better, and seeing that progress really is what I love to do, and why I love my job, being able to do all those different things.
Yeah, can't ask for more. I always tell my athletes I have like the coolest job in the world. I get to sit around and talk to athletes all day. Like, it's super fun. But I think that's a really good point for any of our athletes listening, I guess. Like, I know most athletes at some point thinking about their career, or like when they are asked what they want to do when they're older, a lot of the go-to answers is like something in athletics, right? Like, I want to stay close to sports because that's such a big part of who you are as an athlete. Your whole world has probably revolved around that for as long as you can remember. And it's cool when we bring guests like you on the show, because there are so many different ways to do that, right? Like, you can go into athletic training, you can go into physical therapy, you can go into sports psychology or coaching or strength and conditioning. You can go into like sports media. Like, there are so many different things that you can just look at and explore before making any decisions, or like there really is just something for everybody in the sports world, which is really cool.
Which is great. And I love that, you know, sports are continuing to grow, and the sports psych industry is continuing to grow, because there's definitely a lot of options for youth to you know, continue through their sport. Even if they're not playing, there's other ways to be involved.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, love sports.
I know.
But awesome. Okay, so I guess we can kind of get into some of the topics that I guess we had planned for today too. But just from somebody in your role, so strength and conditioning, coaching, whatever perspective you want to take on this, like, what are some of maybe the more like common mental performance like topics, or like not necessarily issues, but just like topics that you see within the athletes that you work with?
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about just like my personal experience with mental performance. And, you know, growing up, it was definitely not a topic that was talked about. I mean, going to high school, it was just kind of like move on, like, come on, move on from a mistake, move on from something, and, you know, have confidence when you go back to serve. And it's funny because looking back after learning a lot of the stuff that you guys teach your athletes, like, is some of the stuff I just did internally. I remember I would go to bed before like a big game day, and I'd just visualize myself passing a ball, or I'd like, okay, let me try to get this many digs, and I would just close my eyes, I'd visualize, and that put me to sleep. And I would go out in the morning and I'd be like, you know, I feel so much better about, you know, how I'm going to perform today. So using just that visualization technique with like just subconsciously not even realizing what I was doing was as something that I really found helpful throughout my athletic career. But as a coach, kind of in the flip side, like looking at athletes and trying to explain to them, you know, it's not the end of the world if you make a mistake. But I think that's the biggest thing that I see, especially in young female athletes, is just the fear of making mistakes. or the fear of failure, as well as just coping with those mistakes. Like, how do I move on to the next point? In volleyball, you play typically best 2 out of 3. All 3 sets are played to 25. Sometimes the third set's only played to 15. But you have so many opportunities. 1 point or 1 mistake does not define the entire match. And trying to explain that to 12-year-olds at the time is not the easiest. Nope. It's even hard to explain that to some of my freshmen that I coach, and to some of the other girls. It's really hard, and it's, as a coach, sometimes it's frustrating to see because I understand, but I also understand where they're coming from, and understanding that, this sport right now is their life. This is how they identify. They're an athlete, they're a volleyball player, and 1 mistake is the end of the world to them. So it's trying to, coach them in a way that they understand that 1 point does not define who they are. It does not define the game. And how do you move on from that?
Yeah. That's huge. And especially, like you said, at those ages where like we need to learn those things, like whether it's in sport or in life, like 1 little setback, 1 thing, 1 mistake isn't gonna ruin everything else that happens after. It's a hard thing to learn. But it's definitely really important. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So I think, those are the 2. I have a lot of players that also deal with like perfectionism. Like they want to be perfect. And I think any sport, it doesn't have to just be volleyball or hockey or softball. Like any sport is really around failure, and you cannot be perfect. Otherwise, the game would never end. Like if every team was perfect, if every player was perfect, no one would ever score.
And that's no fun.
and it's like, okay, well, what a boring game. We would be here for hours.
Exactly.
So it's part of, not being perfect. And the biggest thing is then how do you learn from those mistakes? And I think that's a big topic that kids need to learn. And a lot of the players, you're not going to be perfect. It's just going to be, how do you move on from that mistake? How do you move on to the next point? Like what's going to be the difference? Are you going to sit there and sulk, or are you going to, move on and say, I'm going to get the next ball? And I think that's a big piece that a lot of kids in any sport really have to just learn. And that's a big part, I think, of what you guys talk to your athletes about, is just, dealing with those mistakes, dealing with perfectionism.
Yes, we talk a lot about that. But I had like a situation that I just noticed like last week at one of our practices that's kind of similar with like wanting to be perfect and not wanting to fail. We were just working on like edge work at hockey practice. We were just skating around cones, like super easy drill. And then we were doing a drill where it's like you would skate to the cone, you would stop, you would skate to the other one, stop, just working on like our footwork and like really easy stuff. And I noticed one of the kids was only stopping on one side. Like he would do everything in his power to not turn and stop on his left foot. So I went over to him after and I was like, hey, like you don't like stopping on your left foot, do you? He goes, what do you mean? I was like, well, the whole time you kept turning around so that way you didn't have to use that foot. And he's like, yeah, like I'm not very good on that foot. And I was like, okay, so now's the time to work on it, right? Like we're in practice, like nobody's gonna laugh if you fall, nobody's gonna get mad at you for falling. Like these are the times that we need to work on these things so that way in a game we can do it and we're not afraid to fall or mess up or not be perfect because we've worked on it, right? In a time and space that is there for us to work on these things. So yeah, as a coach, I've definitely seen a lot of that too.
Yeah, so there's a lot of topics that just you see it in those athletes, and just as a coach, like trying to be my best of how can I help these athletes get through it. Like I'm not a mental performance coach, and I've learned a lot of the topics that you guys, teach and preach to the athletes. So it's, as a coach, what can I do in my role that's going to help you, get over these mistakes without, sitting in the corner crying? Can you put a smile on your face, walk to the end line, touch it, and then come back ready to go and back to that focus. So that's as my role, and as I've learned, trying to get more of that out there, more of the mental performance piece into my coaching.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think a lot of coaches already incorporate mental performance into the way that they coach, probably more than they know, right? Like they have their own way of going about things. Some coaches better than others, right? Some might take an approach that isn't always the best, but I think a lot of coaches do understand the mental side of things. So then it's, okay, how do I create this environment and incorporate these things in a way that are going to help my athlete, like learn that this is a safe environment, not be afraid to fail, and do all of those things. So
I mean, awesome. Part of like what I do with my freshman team is, we have journals. So we'll like sit around, and even if it's not necessarily mental performance related, but we talk about what are the things that we did well, and then not necessarily the things that we did bad, because I feel like that gives a little bit more of a negative note to it. But what are the things that we need to improve? So journaling that, and then talking about it, reflecting at as a whole, as a team, saying, okay, well, this person wants to improve on this, and how can then her teammates help hold her accountable? How can I as a coach help hold her accountable? So some of those like little just conversations that we have, and know that it's a safe space for you to talk about what how you're feeling about the game that happened yesterday, or the mistakes that you made. I think is a big and important thing that coaches of any sport need to have, just giving players that safe space to talk about their feelings.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point. And coaches also like moderating that environment too, to like making sure it's not just pointing fingers and having like a fight, or like saying like, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that. Like, I'm sure you do it a ton with your teams, is just like allowing for those conversations and creating that safe space, but also making sure it's productive and everybody is heard, and something good comes out of it, rather than just complaining or whatever it is that it can turn into, especially with some of like the younger kids, teenagers, whatever, right?
For sure. And I think kind of switching gears into the like physical performance, strength and conditioning, what I've noticed in the weight room is just a lot of kids, especially if they go to either squat, bench, they see out of their peripheral vision 245s, like one on each side of the bar, and they can't do it. And they like go down and they fail. But I could put a 25 and 2 10s on each side of the bar, and they would do it for reps.
Yep.
It's the same weight, but it's that like seeing the bigger weights can almost scare them.
Yeah.
And they're afraid like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of weight, when in reality that 25 and 2 10s is the same weight. And seeing that on the weight room perspective, I think a lot of that same stuff translates over. Like, they want to be perfect, they don't want to miss their lifts. But that's how like personal bests are made, because they're pushing past their limits. And you might fail after one rep, but you've hit one rep, and now that's something that you can move forward to. And so it's learning how to use your failures to help further your success.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point. I know one of the things I used to hear a lot in the weight room when I was coaching was I would like maybe ask an athlete to put a weight on the bar, or like try and push them to like increase their weight a little bit. And then the first thing that they would say when they step up to the bar is like, I can't do that, or like, I'm going to fail, or I'm going to miss this. And it's like, well, if you go into the lift thinking that you're not going to get it, you're probably not going to get it.
For sure.
So being in that coaching role and being the person to help hype them up and help kind of give them that confidence going into it.
And I think that's a big thing. It's, as a strength and conditioning coach, having that confidence in your athlete and portraying that to them, saying, you got this, you can do this, is really big encouraging words to, a middle schooler or a high schooler, trying to do something that, they don't think that they can do. So giving that positive encouragement, I think, goes a long way in their mental psyche of, okay, yeah, you're right, I can go under this, and I can squat 135 pounds even if they've never done it before.
Yeah, but coach believes in me, so I got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, so wholesome. I love it.
Well, there's a lot of different bridges between the like sports coaching and the strength and conditioning coaching. Like, you're a coach, you're there to see the athletes, even if it's in a different way between like the physical training and the actual skills training. But a lot of those same topics kind of cross over the weight room and on the field or court. And it's, as a coach, I think it's really important to have a little bit of an understanding of where that all kind of comes from.
Yes, it's all connected.
It is.
Nice. Okay, so I know we've talked a lot about your like coaching your sport clients and all of that, but I know that you also coach some of our like adult fit classes too, right?
Oh yeah.
So are there any things related to like mental performance or anything that like we've kind of talked about already that you also see in some of those different populations?
Yeah, I think for adults, and it varies based on, what their background is, where they're coming from, but there are definitely some moments where they might not think that they can do a certain exercise or a certain weight for various amount of reasons, but seeing and trying to just coach them in the same way that I would coach, youth, maybe not as, dumbed down, but still, encouraging them and, trying to give them what I feel is, the best kind of coaching advice. I think you can do, the two 20-pound dumbbells versus, I think I'm just going to stay at 10 pounds. It's like, no, I know that you can do it. And, they might be afraid that they can't do it or they're not going to get as many reps, but still finding that same approach to coaching adults that I would, for a high school kid as well. And it's a little bit different because their brains are a little bit more developed. Yeah. So they can understand some of that stuff.
They'll catch on to some of the stuff.
Right. But even so, like, I'll hear some of the adults, like, hyping themselves up versus, like, I don't have to do it for them. Like, they're sitting there like, I can do this. I can lift this weight. And I think that's sometimes the difference. Like, as you mature, you start to realize you're like, I can do this. I'm not afraid to fail, which I think is really cool to see, just the different development stages between, your older elementary school kids to your middle school kids to high school, college, and then beyond into adulthood, seeing just how their brain processes things. And there are kids that, might have started lifting when they were in 6th grade and they were scared to lift the bar. Whereas now they're a freshman or a sophomore in high school and they're like, the bar is my warm up. So just seeing that mentality, and they've gotten like stronger and, more physically fit for it, but just their mentality going into things is way different. And I think that really translates into adulthood as well.
Nice. And you get to help shape that.
And I do, yeah.
That's so fun. I love it. Okay. Well, I don't know. We've talked about a lot of really good stuff so far. I'm excited for this. But I guess kind of wrapping things up and like getting back to, again, like what I mentioned at the beginning with bridging the gap between mental performance and physical performance. As a coach, how do you think that like mental performance coaches can help kind of connect the dots between like the mental and physical pieces of things? Yeah,
I mean, I think there's a ton of different ways, and it really comes down to like what each coach is willing to give. And that's one of the nice things that I like about like the relationships that we have in the office. Like if I'm having a problem, like I could go to you or to Emily or any one of the coaches and say, hey, like this is the problem that I'm having with my team. How do you suggest that I like go about it? So I think coaches understanding part of like the mental performance, tactics or how their approaches are with individuals or with teams can be super important and helpful, because I've learned so much and I've changed my entire coaching like strategy based off of some of the topics that I've learned through mental performance from the company. And I think that's been really beneficial to how I coach. But I think to any coach, just trying to understand both perspectives, understand the athlete, where the athlete is coming from, and understand, okay, this is my coaching philosophy, but let me try to put myself in the athlete's shoes. How would they feel? So I think that's a pretty big piece of just understanding both roles. And as a mental performance coach, understanding similarly, why the coach might be choosing to do something that the athlete might not be, loving. You might have an athlete come in and complain like, oh, coach made us do this and I didn't like trying to go off my left foot during practice. Well, it's like understanding, well, are you good at your left foot? It's like, well, no, I don't like doing it off my left foot. Well, your coach is trying to push you to, be better at it and use that at practice. So then when it comes to a game, you can go from both sides. So as a mental performance coach, in my eyes, like understanding both sides as well as a athletic coach, as well as the athlete, why might things be going whatever way between each side.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I hadn't really thought about it like that, I guess, while we were kind of prepping for this, but we do get a lot of athletes that come in and it's like, oh, my coach didn't play me, my coach didn't do this, and it's like, okay, like we want to sympathize with them and we'll talk through it and hear what they're feeling and like feel it with them, right? Like we're going to be there with them, but then it's like, okay, what do we think our coach saw in that position, right? Like why might they have made these decisions? So yeah, I like that. That's a really good point.
I think that's a big piece to like how I view my role just as a strength trainer, but then also as a former athlete as well as a sports coach now. Yeah. So just seeing myself in different shoes and, you know, that really helps my decision making, and it also helps me explain to an athlete why I chose to do something.
Right.
Or if an athlete comes to me and asks me a question, like I have a couple different like backgrounds to pull from. Like I could pull from my athletic background, I could pull from a strength and conditioning perspective, or I could just pull from my knowledge of a coach. So just understanding the different, you know, avenues that you can take as a coach, I think is super important into how you approach different topics with athletes.
Yeah, nice. I like that. I know obviously mental performance is still kind of like an up and coming thing too. Like it's not it's not the norm right now. I think it's definitely becoming more popular and a lot of athletes are using it more and promoting it more, but I think there definitely is still a little bit of stigma around mental performance coaching and sports psychology. Especially from some of like maybe our old school coaches. I know when I was in grad school, I was doing some sports psych work with a local hockey program, and they had a few of like the older like dad coaches that, it's like, oh, you just gotta toughen up, right? Like just be out there and do whatever. And I'll never forget, I walked into the rink on one of my first days and I went to introduce myself to one of the coaches. And the first thing he said to me was, oh, so you're the shrink they're sending in. And it was just like right off the bat, I was like, okay, I know that this is a coach that I'm going to have to win over and show kind of what we can do together. And like that I'm not here because there's a problem. I'm not here because they're having issues on the team or he's doing something wrong or there's something going on. Like I'm here to help your athletes perform to their best. So do you see kind of like that perspective shifting with like maybe other coaches that you've worked with?
Oh, for sure. I mean, and it's kind of the nice thing, the coach that I had growing up and the coach that I currently assist with right now is big on just like the mental health piece of it, which is really cool to see. And I've noticed as we play other schools, there's other teams and other coaches that understand the value to it. And they want to do everything that they can to try to bring in, whether it's a mental performance coach or a program to implement into their program. And I think that's really important, especially as we move forward, because like you said, it definitely is becoming more and more prevalent. And I know that some coaches, you know, might not want it, but I think that's just kind of the direction we're going. And just as mental health in general becomes a bigger topic in the States and all over the world, I think we'll see a lot more of these like mental performance coaches at all different levels. And I know like the Olympics have sports psychologists, professional teams do, colleges do. So I think it's just a matter of time before, you know, the younger, like the high school level, the club levels, they start to bring in or implement a program to help their athletes and their coaches understand why mental performance is important and how it can benefit their athletes. Yeah, it's exciting, I think, to see where it's going to go. And I think one of the things too that a lot of people forget about, and I forget about as a mental performance coach sometimes too, is that like, yeah, I'm here for the athletes and most of the work that we do is with the athletes directly, but like we can also be mental performance coaches for coaches, right? We can help them be the best coaches that they can be. We can help them not get burnt out and learn strategies to rest and recover and take care of themselves and set boundaries. And just again, like that full circle thing of like athletes, coaches, like just everybody working together and making sure you're on the same page to just be the best and enjoy it and have fun with it. So. Oh yeah. I mean, it's a growing industry and it's exciting to be a part of it. And that's kind of why I love what my role is here at the company, because I'm not just on the physical performance side. I do help a lot with the mental performance side, and just understanding and learning from you guys, like what are the best tactics, like you were just mentioning, for myself, not just as a coach, but like as an individual, how can I use these tactics to help in my everyday life? And it's not just for sports, like it's stuff that I can apply, and I try to have athletes apply to their everyday life. You're not just an athlete, like you're a student, you're a daughter, you're a friend, and so how can you like show up and be the best individual throughout your entire life?
Nice. Oh, so good. Good stuff on this episode. All right, well, we will kind of wrap it up, but before we go, I know in honor of Francis usually leading these episodes, I have to ask you the most important question. What is your favorite color?
My favorite color is blue.
Oh, okay. Good choice. I would have guessed that. I think that would have been my guess. But awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys for inviting me and having me. And I enjoyed just this conversation and kind of seeing what you guys kind of all do.
Yeah, it's fun here. We like it. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. We will see you next time.
If you like what you're listening to, be sure to follow the Athlete Cafe on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can find us wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts.